Hello, everyone. Today I'm speaking to Reverend Michael J. Carter. He's returning today not to continue the conversation we had last time about religious implications, but to share his own experiences with UAPs. I wanted to provide you guys with my disclaimer today also. It's that the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this video belong solely to the speakers and not necessarily to the UAP Medical Coalition, its employees, volunteers, or affiliates. All medical references are for informational purposes only. This is not a consultation or therapy session. This content can be triggering for some and is not meant for children. So, thank you for coming back today, Reverend Carter. I really appreciate talking to you. Can you please remind people who you are before we get into your encounters with UAPs?
Sure, yes. My name is Reverend Michael J. Carter.
Do you want to tell people a little bit about your background a little?
Well, yeah, I am a minister. I serve a Unitarian Universalist congregation here in Western North Carolina. I am a father, I am a husband, um, and I am an experiencer.
Can you please tell us a little bit about your experiences with UAPs?
My experiences with UAPs are more of seeing the occupants as opposed to seeing the craft. Although under hypnosis, I did discover that I have been on a craft. I will start with this one. This is not my first one, but since this has a more of a medical flavor to it. In January of 2013, was kind of a rough year. 2012 was kind of a rough year, and going into 2013. It sounds more like a country western song or a blues song, but I was getting divorced. My dad had died, and I was getting fired from my job as a chaplain at a hospital and here in North Carolina. And so, never had a history of it in my uh, medical history, but I wound up with a blood clot. And I had never had a blood clot before, so I didn't really know what was happening to me. And so I had a blood clot on my right leg from my um, ankle to the groin area. I thought I had pulled a muscle. I do energy healing, so I put some energy on it, some Reiki. It would go away. The pain would go away. It was excruciating, but it would always come back. And my one of my friends said to me, Michael, you've had this for a couple of days now, complaining. You need to go to see a doctor. And I did. I went to see my primary care physician. And when I told him what was going on, he took me into the examination room and he said to me, did you come here alone? I said, yes. He said, can you drive? I said, yeah, I drove here. He said, you need to go and get him and have this looked at. And he said, you've got a blood clot. And if it burst, you're going to have a big problem. So anyway, I went and got that done. And that's when I discovered I had the blood clot. I had to take something called a Nexaparin. It is a blood thinner. I had to inject it in my stomach uh, a couple times a day to try to shrink the clot, and it was a blood thinner. And I was later on something Wayfair, and what do they call? I don't know what the other name for that is, but do you know what I'm talking about? So um, on July, let me make sure I got this right. Was it July? Yes, July 4th, 2013. I had a healing from someone who looked like a Palladian. It was at 9:50 p.m.
Wait, I'm going to pause right there. What does a Palladian look like? Because not everyone viewing this will know what that means.
They call them the Nordics. Here's one of them. Blonde, blue-eyed person. I have a friend of mine make who's a sculptor. Well, she's an artist. Every UFO person that I've seen, I tell her, and she makes a sculptor for me. They're also known as the Nordics. They're blonde, blue-eyed. They're a humanoid, and they look pretty much like a human being, but you can tell that they aren't, though. Um, so I have a lot of friends. There's a backstory. I have a lot of friends who fought in the Vietnam War. I did not. And we had a conversation a few weeks before about the war. Some of my friends talk about it a lot. Some of them don't talk about it at all. And they were talking about, fighting, and you're in your foxhole and it's raining, and, you try to get a couple hours sleep. It sounded horrific, but this was war. July 4th, um, I'm trying to be a good dad. My ex, who's my ex now, but we were married and we have a child, they love fireworks. I can't stand them, but they love them. And we would go every year. I hated to go, but I would go. Family time. And it was just it takes an hour to find parking. You got to get out there at 7. It doesn't get dark till 9:30, and then they only show them from like 9:30 to 10. So on July 4th, 2013, there were thunderstorms, terrible thunderstorms, and they canceled it. And I was so happy. And it was lightning and thunder, and the thunder reminded me, it sounded like artillery. It sounds like we were at a war, like people were firing artillery at each other. And I thought to myself, this must be what my friends went through in Vietnam, because they said sometimes you have to catch a couple hours sleep. There may be ingoing, outgoing artillery, and I thought of them. I usually sleep on my stomach, but I wasn't asleep. I was lying down. And much like my first encounter in 1989, I just felt the room, the energy in the room change. That's the only way I can explain it. It got deathly quiet. The air was thick, and something said, "Turn around." And when I turned around, this gentleman was there, but he had on a cowl, a hoodie, like one of a monk would have on, like in the Renaissance time. There was a rope around his the robe. He was so built you could see the muscles bulging through the robe. He had like a page boy hair, blonde hair, but he was ghostly white. He was very pale. He was as tall as my ceiling. And my nervous system, I could feel myself hyperventilating, the fear. And he held out his hand, and out of his hand shot an apple green light. And it hit me in my stomach, because when I had turned over, I sat up, and it hit me in my stomach. I didn't feel anything, but I watched it hit me in the stomach. And then he dissolved. His molecules just separated. When I looked down at where my stomach, and I looked down, and my leg, which was swollen 3 times of what it normally is, it was normal. It was normal. The clot was gone. I called my friend, this was at 9:50 Eastern time. I called my friend Preston Dennett, who's written 2 books on UFO healings. The first one I had, he hadn't written the second one yet. He's put the story I'm telling you in that book. But Preston, who lives on the East Coast now, was now living in California. So when I called him at 10, actually 9:50 is 10 of 10. It must have been 10 of 7 there. Anyway, he was not home. So then the next day, I tell my ex and my daughter, and I went over there, and they both did this at the same time. They were like, they cured your blood clot because my legs were normal. This was the problem. I had to go to the doctor because every week or 10 days they would stick me, and draw blood and see, what my blood level was. And so when I went and I showed them and they were like, "What? How
Did
did this happen?" No, 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 I didn't tell them because they
yeah.
would lock me up. But they could not accept it.
Mm.
And so it was like an interrogation. I said, "Well, maybe the medicine's working." "Well, it doesn't work that fast. You were just here a week, 10 days ago, Mr. Carter, and we took your blood. Your leg was just, well, what happened here?" And I couldn't keep it. I didn't know what to tell them. I just said, "Well, it's gone." Well, how? We see it's gone. What happened? Finally, I said to them, "Look, I don't know what happened, and neither do you. But aren't you happy? Can't you at least be happy? The blood clot is gone. This is what we were trying to get to with it was Coumadin they wanted me on, which I stayed on for about 3 months, and the enoxaparin, which is what I was injecting myself with in my stomach. My whole stomach was black and blue because I had to keep giving myself these injections. And when I flipped it, when I said, "I don't know what happened, neither do you, but it's gone. Aren't you happy? This is the result we were trying to get to." And they backed off. And they said, "Oh, well, of course we're happy. We just don't understand how this happened." I said, "I don't know either, but it's gone."
So,
And that's the end of that story.
well, I have to ask, you didn't want to tell them because you felt like they would lock you up. Do you think it would have been
Well, it's
benefit?
hyperbole, but they would have thought
Yeah,
there was some psycho. I needed some type of medication or something.
right.
I
So do
told
you
them.
think that it would have been helpful in any way for you to be able to have that conversation with your medical doctors about, this person being in your room? Um,
Well, of course. Hold on, I dropped something. Of course, it would have been helpful. Listen, when I first was started having those experiences in 1989, I was in therapy. Not for that, but I was in therapy for some family of origin codependency, just stuff. I wanted to get my life together, and when I told my therapist, I took a chance and told my therapist about it, and he accepted it. He didn't laugh. He didn't question it. Now, he's a deeply spiritual person. At that time, he was a student of the Course in Miracles. But, because I took a chance and he just accepted that. He
and
didn't say, "Boy, that's the sickest thing I ever heard," or "What are you, crazy?" And so we just incorporated those experiences into my life because they were happening pretty frequently at that time. So of course it would help. The ridicule and shame and stuff like that is not helpful for anybody, whether it's extraterrestrial contact, whether it's having an out of body experience, whether it's having psychic phenomenon. Half of the healing process, in my estimation, and people come to me for counseling who've had these experiences, is just being able to listen without judgment.
so can you tell me a little bit about what that end result for you and your mental health, having that acceptance was like? Because we don't get that feedback a lot that their therapist or a medical health provider, but anyone gave them
Well,
acceptance.
at
What?
that time, it was extremely helpful because I was going through a little post traumatic stuff there because this was happening pretty regularly and with different beings showing up. And, I was in a support group at that time for experiencers. So I did have um, other people, like minded people, who were having these experiences, and we could share with each other. So I can't stress enough how important that was to me. When I first underwent hypnosis with Dr. Gene Mundy, who kind of specialized in working with experiences, and of course the late Bud Hopkins, who was a friend of mine and a colleague, that had helped because again, I wasn't crazy. These experiences were happening, that kind of thing. But to have another mental health professional, and it wasn't that he never even said whether he believed it or not. He just listened and incorporated it into the therapy, and because it was something that was happening in my life. I lived in the closet, to coin a phrase, for many, many years because these things were happening to me, but I had no one to talk to about them until, you know, I started um, going to a support group.
Oh, I'm really happy that you had someone who was willing to listen.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
yeah, and honestly, the fact that you mentioned that you don't know whether or not your therapist believes you is
Mm,
important because I tell people all the time, it doesn't matter if the therapist believes, it matters how they treat the person that's coming to them.
yes,
Do
yes.
you have any final suggestions to medical doctors or therapists who would have someone come to them for help?
I would suggest what I just suggested, and if you feel like you couldn't do that, then maybe you could. There are places you can go. There are referrals. There are places who specialize in working with experiencers. There's one place that I know of that some of these therapists themselves are experiencers. They do. Uh, uh, they're very select because they don't want to lose their jobs. But there are people who can talk to experiencers. All of them aren't experiencers. Some of them are, but they specialize in working with people. So I would think the non-judgment, the withholding judgment, is key because, as many of us know, counselors, therapists, that there's a healing, um, there's the possibility of healing when there's non judgment, when the person feels safe. And I would just encourage that. Read up on the phenomenon. There are plenty of books out on this. And that way you have some homework done, there's some background. And when someone comes to you with these things, they may not seem as far out or as outlandish um, as they may have been if you had not availed yourself to the literature and the information that's out there.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that information and sharing some of your experiences. I have a feeling that we could probably go through a whole bunch of them, but I think the main point for UAP Med was that the people who are providing assistance should be listening in a non-judgmental way
Oh,
to
yeah.
provide assistance. And it sounds like also finding a support group was very helpful for you. So I hope other people listening to this will look at some of the resources that we've provided for finding assistance. And maybe when we're done recording, you can suggest additional resources that I can put on that list
Mhm.
for people. Are there any final thoughts that you want to share with people about what you've been through? Regarding the psychology of encountering occupants and UAPs, or related to the medical, or just any final thoughts that you have?
Well, I would, the final thoughts that I have is this: we're in an exciting time. We're finding out, many of us already knew that, many experiencers, that we're not alone. I never thought I'd see the day that my government would come clean or is trying to be as transparent as it can be, or as it is being. We just had the hearings, what, a week or so ago. So if this is the perfect time, when it's in the news, it's not so much taboo to talk about it, um, that this is the perfect time now um, to be to avail yourself to experiencers and to the literature that's out there, because this has been going on for, well, in modern times, in our times, for at least 80 years. But we know it's been going on in cultures around the world since human beings have been on the planet.
Okay, could you please let people know where they can reach you if they want to find out more information from you?
Sure. You can reach me at my email is my email is Michael J.S. Carter at gmail.com. My website is Reverend Michael J.S. Carter. Any books and anything that I've written, you can just type my name in Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and they will come up. If you send me an email, you can get me on Facebook as well. If you send me an email, I will respond.
Mm. Thank you again so much. I really appreciate you coming back and talking to me today. And thank you to everyone who listened today.
Yes, and thank you for having me.
Of course. Take care, everybody.